Hi, Dr. Holly. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
And the hook we're going to give the audience is that firstly, microplastics everywhere and in our brains and coming from clothes, and we wash our clothes too much, and various TV shows said the French government is stupid for telling us that we don't need to wash as much, and amazingly you've written a PhD on this. So you're actually Dr. Holly Kaye-Smith, and we're talking about needing to wash your clothes less and thereby, as an accidental side effect, putting less microplastics. So how did you get here? What was your pathway to get here?
Well, everything that I've done has been about, conservation really. But during undergrad and particularly my postgraduate years, I was examining the fashion system, the entire fashion sector, looking at the sustainability issues and opportunities. When I came to, writing up my thesis and where I'm going to be actioning or where my focus is on the fashion system, I found that clothes laundering is actually one of the heaviest burdens of a garment's lifetime. So when we think about all of the resources, energy, pollution in making and disposal, up to 82% of a garment's total environmental impact happens in the use phase. So that's washing and drying. And couple that with the fact that up to 93% of the clothes that we wash aren't actually dirty or heavily soiled. I don't like to use that word because it makes you think of dirty nappies, but we're talking about dirt on clothes. So we've got an opportunity here to significantly reduce our environmental burden with our clothes and also reduce our water, chemicals, electricity, and so forth.
Okay, so at the end of 2024, let me quote from the peer-reviewed journal The Daily Express in London. The Ecological Transition Agency has urged the French public to wear a T-shirt for up to 5 days and jeans for 30 before washing them. It said that sports and workout clothes, I'm going to quote exactly, should be worn 3 times. Really? And bras 7 times, and woolen jumpers need to wash only after 15 days wear, and bed sheets and pyjamas after a week. Is that really what the French Ecological Transition Agency said?
No, and this absolutely infuriated me because when my mum actually messaged me and said, you should have been talking about this instead of them, and I went looking and there's all of these TV shows and newspaper articles reporting these numbers, as though the French population have to abide by this certain, 3 to 5 jeans 30 times, all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, washing less is not rigid. It has to be flexible. People have to be able to feel like they can examine their clothes and, wear it again or not, And I thought, who balls this up? It's either the media or the French government because someone has a good message but is communicating it incorrectly. So I went digging and digging and digging. And this is all I don't speak French. And I was like, Google Translate, thank God. I did manage to track down the document and the other ones that they released. And it was a guide for more ecological cleaning.
Guide. So it was a guide.
Yep.
In other words, not rigid rules you must follow, but a guide for ecological cleaning. Yeah, okay.
And, this clothes washing media sabotage was just one page out of an entire guide, which actually was focusing more on, yes, the environmental consequences of the chemicals that we use, but also the quality of our air in our home. So they were focusing on volatile organic compounds and air quality and the impacts on health. Now, their wash less section had no numbers except the only number it had was you need to wash your undies after each wear. That's the only number that they reported. The others were like, jeans could be worn several times before washing. And they had a phrase at the top that says not all clothes need to be washed after one wear. And when they said, there was blouses. They even said blouses were actually more of a one-wear thing. But all the other things, it's just these could be worn several times. And the definition of several is more than 2 but not many.
That's quite different from how the Daily Express in London and then various TV shows in Australia, such as Sunrise, reported on it, and they went straight for the hit the outrage button. And amazingly, you've actually done about 8 years earlier a PhD called you did a PhD at the University of Western Sydney University, doing laundry more sustainably, disrupting everyday practices through media conversations. And there was a phrase in here that I particularly love that I'd like to plagiarise. In fact, I will plagiarise. We cannot consume our way out of climate change, and yet we're being told, oh, buy this brand of shoe polish or that bottle of water to consume your way out of climate change, which is just totally wrong. So you had done a whole PhD on that. What was your reasoning behind doing this PhD? What made you think about this particular topic?
Well, in terms of like communications, I've always wanted to learn about issues of the world and know what I can personally do about it. So I wanted to identify issues and give instruction, because for me, I would become quite anxious or sad if I learn about issues of the world and have no idea how I'm connected to them or what I can do about it. So this is the kind of human-centred design and human-centred interventions to these issues. We're trained or conditioned to think that we respond to issues of the world like climate change with shopping. And that is definitely, we do need to make better choices. That is very, very important. But, there's also the things that we can do ourselves in our daily lives that have a significant impact, and that is equally as important as when we're out shopping and buying things. And you can really empower people. Washing less is a very good example of empowering people with the bravery, the skills, the critical thinking to start reassessing things in their own life and changing it, changing habits that no longer serve us.
You did mention that, and you went through the various chapters in your PhD, and you actually did a bit of guerrilla videoing. Can you take us through that?
So I was addressing the greatest barrier to change. So I was sitting there and thinking, what's the greatest barrier to change? Feeling like people think that you stink and being perceived as unclean. I removed the washing machine from the refreshing technique that we do to our clothes before we wear them. So I tried no wash refreshing techniques on my own clothes, and then I cut the armpits out of those clothes, and then I stuck them to a sniff board, and then I went around the streets of Sydney getting random people to sniff the armpits of my unwashed clothes.
You actually sacrificed some items of clothing, and had you worn these for different periods of time?
I did a workout top, a going out top, which I smeared barbecue sauce and kebab on me, so everything smelt, and a work top.
And then you, with a video crew, then confronted people in the streets?
Yeah, I was quite surprised. It was very fun. I didn't really think that people would get on board it, but I had a megaphone and a sniff board and a camera crew, and my catchphrase was, "Will you sniff my pits for the planet?" And I would tell people about the environmental burden of laundering, and every single time, even public bus, glebe markets, I'd get a hand and someone would come up, and sometimes they'd be blanketing their whole face in the armpits of my clothes. So that was confronting for me too.
The armpits were on a board?
Yeah, on a
So it
sniff
wasn't
board.
like they had to go
No.
up your physical armpit. Okay, right. So they were able to come to this flat board.
Yep, and
Okay,
have a
yep.
smell and talk about the different refreshing techniques and how they worked. But the very surprising thing that happened was that it unlocked these conversations with people talking about how they cheat a wash, how they get bonus wears. And, by putting my own body on the line, it took the judgment off the people participating and made it possible for them to open up and be a little bit, honest or more flexible about their washing routines. Because, washing less is often perceived as a shameful, lazy thing. But I was proposing it in a way where it was a thrifty, intelligent thing.
Right. And give us an idea of how much water can be used, say, in jeans, making them, wearing them. You got any numbers for us?
So jeans, depending on where the cotton is grown, just the cotton alone, 1 kilo of cotton can require 15,000 litres of water.
15 tonnes. Hang on.
15,000, yeah.
So is there 1 kilo of cotton in jeans, roughly?
Yeah.
Ballpark figure. And that requires 15 tonnes of water. Wow, that's like 1/3 of a backyard swimming pool.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
huge. Okay, that's just to manufacture them?
That's just to grow the cotton.
Just
And
to
then
grow
you've
the
got to
cotton.
manufacture, you've got to, we do have different techniques that Levi's has been, reduced water, kind of dyeing and things like that. So that is reducing, but ultimately there's thousands and thousands of litres. And then the mileage that transporting, the material around, and the dyes, the manufacture of the dyes. There was quite famously the pollution in China, where there was a river where babies were born deformed. There were people with lesions over their body. They were poor people, and they'd have to put handfuls of drugs in their buckets of water so that they could drink it. It was really quite awful. So consequences are ongoing. Animals, human, water, energy, climate change.
So can you give us another example of clothing and resources needed to keep them clean?
A T-shirt, the T-shirt that I'm wearing, used 2,700 litres to make it, but it'll use over 15,000 litres of water to wash it in its lifetime. So that's, just one example. And there's, a lot of energy and chemicals and things like that, but water, everyone's pretty familiar with the water.
Now, before we dive into this little checklist of things you neatly provided, I was reading that roughly 1/3 of the microplastics in the environment come from the washing machine water carrying away microfibers from synthetic clothes such as nylon and acrylic and so forth. And when it goes in the ocean, it goes in the food cycle. We've got firstly the word plasticenta being invented in 2021 because we're finding the majority of placentas of women have got microplastics in them in every drop of rain that falls out of the sky, bottom of Marianas Trench and the top of Mount Everest. And unfortunately, 7 grams of microplastics in our brain, which on one hand is 0.5% of the weight of the brain, but in terms of volume is like 7 plastic screw caps like you find on a bottle of water. 6 or 7 of those plastic screw caps is the size of the microplastics in our brain, and that's made worse by washing more frequently.
And sadly, it's the cheap clothes too. The cheap clothes that, fast fashion are usually made from these materials that are sometimes designed not to be worn more than 10 times. So,
really?
Yeah, and they release a lot of plastic when they get washed, and then they're thrown away and then replaced.
What, do they look bad after a couple of washes, or the seams come loose? What goes wrong with them?
Yep, that does happen. This is another reason, we don't always wash our clothes because they're dirty, Clothes can, for especially female clothes, they'll warp out of shape, and you have to wash them to get them to work again. You see teenagers, when they live with their parents, will sometimes chuck clothes in the washing machine even if they haven't washed them, just because it takes less time than folding it and putting it away, and their parents will do it for them. Like, there's lots of reasons why we wash the way that we do. But yes, these microsynthetic fibres often coming from cheap synthetic clothes, and these are. This was years ago, when I was doing this, like 8 years ago, but I would tell people, because people were like, wash your clothes less boring, you can see them glaze over. And so I'd always say, microsynthetic fibres are found in the blood and cells of the fish we eat from laundry grey water. And, as these animals get eaten, it gets intensified as it goes up the food chain, and we're at the very top.
So there are grounds for firstly making clothes not out of synthetic fibres, or if they are synthetic, not from fossil fuels, which won't break down, but rather from something that might be synthetic that will break down. And secondly, for washing less. So you said that humour and, let me see here, self-directed judgment were essential to helping people get to a new understanding. How do you find that?
When you're talking to people about changing their behaviour, it can be you'll very quickly trigger defence if they feel like they're being judged or told that what they're doing is wrong. So I like to take that away from them, and so that's by using me, so that they can tell me that I stink or that something works or it doesn't, and they're judging me first, and then they can talk about their experience. But it just breaks down that barrier, because you'll very quickly get people defensive and angry and resist the message angrily, and then kind of dig their heels in more. And that's why I was so furious about how this was reported in the media, because they were posing in a way, like even doing vox pops with people on the street who were saying, that's disgusting, wash your clothes, that's feral, like all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, aside from the fact that we know that when, producers and media makers are doing vox pops, you're not really getting someone's, you're tailoring a question to elicit a response. And by having, panel show people talking about, how stinky and gross it is, and people on the street feeling like they need to join in on that because they'll be judged and they'll be considered unhygienic. Everything that they did, I would write down as a what not to do, and was pretty much the opposite of what I did in my experiments.
Because you also talk about the hidden truth about why we wash clothes and the various societal pressures. Can you tell us a bit about that?
The reasons that we wash our clothes have more to do with religious piety and a multi-billion-dollar detergent and white goods sector than it is about washing dirty clothes. And the pressures that we feel are from the media messages and the campaigns that are trying to make it. I mean, you look at how the evolution of washing. Every year there's new gadgets, and it's become this incredibly. You could make it so complicated if you wanted to buy every single gadget that has been invented and use every single product to clean your clothes. But it's actually not that complicated. We don't need that many things, and in an age where our body is cleaner than it's ever been, and we're not talking about surgeons and their scrubs, but our bodies are cleaner than they've ever been. So therefore, allows an opportunity to maybe wear your clothes, a shirt again.
So that leads us into what sort of sustainable tips and practical tips you have. So what I do sometimes, if the shirt has been hardly worn, is I'll hang it up and I try to find a coat hanger that's fairly wide, not just wire, but something's got a bit of depth to it, so that way the air can come through, then hang it up opposite an open window so the air can blow on it. Am I doing the right?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, all right. Give us some more.
So you can, if you've got, obviously spot cleaning. If I've worn a top and I haven't stained it and it's not terribly sweaty, sun and air is a really great cleanser. And we're pretty familiar with UV killing some bacteria, so people are quite comfortable with that. But once you start practicing washing less or no wash refreshing methods, some tops I'll just put them inside out on a hanger and then behind a chair, or put it in a well-ventilated place. You can use shower steam when you're having a shower to lift some odours.
Oh,
lemon juice
really?
or vodka on the armpits, of your
Wow.
clothes, just to neutralise that bacteria. Having a rewear chair is a good thing, because if you take your clothes off and put it straight in the laundry basket or straight in the washer, you're never going to retrieve it out of those. They're a cesspit of no return, is what I call them.
Right.
But if you give your garment an opportunity to be worn or assessed later, quite often you can get a second wear.
A rewear chair.
So chuck your shirt over the back of a chair, and then you might revisit it in a couple of days and go, oh no, actually, or if you do your washing on a Thursday or whatever, you can assess it, do the sniff test, and decide if you can get another wear.
So have a chair in the bedroom that's designated as a rewear chair.
Yeah.
Because Winston Churchill, remember him? He always made sure that in every bedroom where he was, he had a chair that had a steel back and steel floor, so he could hide behind it if assassins came through to shoot him.
Wow.
You don't need to go quite that far.
But look at how practical the chair is.
It's got many uses. So what sort of communication strategies are you thinking out here for positive change to make the world a better place?
I think it's really important to make the issue relevant and important to the participant or the listener or the learner. So coming out and saying the stinky conundrum, French are going to stink, would you wear your workout top 3 times? Or, for French are saying you need to wash less because it's for the environment. There's no context there. People just think that they're getting bossed around and that it's, why would I compromise my own hygiene? But if you come into the situation and make it matter to them. I talked about microsynthetic fibers, and that everyone says, oh my gosh, I eat fish and that's in the ocean, that matters to me. So then they listen.
You're then trying, and you write about this, you're trying to go for the big picture, sustainability as a bigger issue, and how we can't necessarily consume our way out of climate change or out of a dirty environment. So can you talk about that for a bit?
Absolutely. And I should mention too that a really important part of changing behaviour is actually getting people to try it. So talking about something in a way, I like to leverage humour and hope. The sniff test there, that was something that people wouldn't expect and they hadn't seen before, so that makes it a bit interesting, and a bit entertaining. But creating a space where a person is curious and will give it a go, that's when the change happens. It doesn't sound so significant, but in all of these studies, like Talia Jack, she did a study on getting people to not wash their jeans for 2 weeks. And they would try different refreshing things like, the shower steam, the sun and air, refreshing. And by people trying it, they had all of these realizations and then ended up washing less. They actually found that jeans don't get any dirtier after 2 weeks. So if you were, no more, the population of like bacteria or dirt or whatever will never get dirtier than after 2 weeks. So if you go 2 weeks with not washing your jeans, you could go a lot longer, really. It's not going to get any dirtier unless you're like tipping stuff on it.
Yeah, I do believe that there are some subsets of our population that reckon that black clothes are self-cleaning, but we'll just forget that and leave that off to the side there. So when you're talking about the communication things, on one hand, you've got this massive advertising industry saying wash all the time and coming through many branches of the media and social media. So how do you find a way to go back to them? Like yourself individually on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think conversations are really important too. Like if we can make public what we do in private. Clothes washing is one of these activities in our life that is almost exclusively dictated by the detergent and white goods sector. The only information outside of that commercial setting is what you see your parents doing when you grow up. So if we can talk about what we're doing and not be dictated by, commercial interests and start sharing our tricks and trades so that we can make our home life more sustainable, these conversations are really important and could create a lot of change from the ground up.
What sort of things are you doing now? How can people follow you and your fine work?
I'm going to be releasing some stuff on social media. Eventually, I've been a little bit quiet, but I've been working on some resources. So LinkedIn. Facebook, TikTok. Yeah, my handle's at Dr. Holly PhD.
Oh, wow. Look, thank you so much for taking us on this
me.
surprising journey, which I've always been doing secretly anyway, just hanging clothes up in the sunlight and let some wind go across them. And by the way, I follow your hint when I hang clothes on the line. I always turn the undies inside out so the ultraviolet light can come and do. I'm a bit of a fan of hanging clothes on the line.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holly.
Thank you for having me.
Shirtloads of Science is washed, spun and aired by the University of Sydney.